I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the Mosaic of Wine Series 1. Giving my audience of wine lovers, students and professionals from across the world access to some of the most interesting, successful and influential people working in and around the world of wine. Series episodes explore the guest's backstory, covering their foundations, growth and legacy, using Interpreting Wine's Mosaic storytelling model. I would love this episode and this series to be the start of a conversation, so please make sure you're subscribed to Interpreting Wine podcast to be alerted when each series episode goes live. We continue the Mosaic of Wine series today in the company of Andreas Wickhoff MW, General Manager for Weingut Bründlmayer. We hear Andreas's origin story, touching on his sommelier brother's influence, as well as global experiences in Australia, North America and France, followed by his return to Austria. We discuss Bründlmayer's role in recovery after the Austrian Wine Scandal. We talk Master of Wine program and how it applies to Andreas' current role. We discuss whether the wine world is changing quickly enough. Before an update on Bründlmayer's place in Austria today, innovation in the winery, the search for quality, and a discussion on climate change. Enjoy.
My brother, who is a little bit older than I am, was definitely influential in bringing me towards more interest in the world of wine. So he had a very good sommelier education here from Austria. He then also became a trader. And so he was trading wine here in Austria for a then very important distributor, and that brought also other wines into our living room, and not only wines from Austria, which was largely at that time the case, domestic wines, but also wines from abroad, and that raised my interest definitely there in exploring this world of wine further. That was one thing, and with that he also showed me a couple wine books, obviously, and at the time the most inspiring one for me was the one from Chances Robinson, the wine course, and reading through this book, and also especially also reading how she came to the wine world and what sort of education she has undergone, raised my level of interest further in the world of wine. So those were the first two initial components why this whole business that we live in now raised further interest. Yeah,
that makes total sense, and I think also it would be interesting to kind of ground us as well in where you are there in Austria, or I should rather say where you grew up in Austria, which is Südsteiermark, and I believe you had sort of influential experiences visiting wineries, and that helped to sort of open your eyes as well.
Correct, yeah. So originally I was raised a little bit further north of Südsteiermark, and not far away from the town of Graz, which is the second largest city of Austria. And after high school, I went to a college of hotel and tourism management, where I met one of my still existing friends, my best buddies, and he's also a true wine nerd. And while studying down there, we also explored some of the wineries close by the college of Vulkanland, Steiermark, and then also Südsteiermark. And especially one specific visit in 1998 at Sattlerhof, which is a renowned producer in this appellation, just completely raised my interest in wine, and you have those aha moments in your wine life where you say this wine will be remembered forever, and in that case that was in 1998 the 97 single vineyard Cranachberg Sauvignon Blanc that was just mind-blowing at the time, and still is if you still get a bottle of it. So this gave me hope, but also in a way true thought process behind, okay, why is the wine like it is? Because it was very much a lot of sense of place that you were experiencing there, and at the same time, obviously due to the grape variety, also quite aromatic. Probably for a then, and I was completely a novice in a way. Also a little bit more understandable than you won't start with a very subtle, subdued style of wine, and where you have to really search for a lot of things. And I think that comes further along the road in your wine life.
Yeah, well, it's again, great that you've got that. You've got that sort of, say, aha moment. You've got that. Obviously, it's left a sort of a deep impression on you, and you still remember the kind of the emotion and the feeling kind of to this day.
I think the taste.
Well, and it's also representative of where you grew up, and I'm sure there are interesting kind of hooks into the culture and cuisine and all of these other things, which I think we'll certainly get into. One thing I would like to do, I think, just to sort of set the scene really for what we'll talk about, which I thought was really interesting when I was reading your sort of history and reading your questionnaire, was also then around your experiences outside of Austria, because I know that you've kind of mentioned there kind of how you got your start, and I just wonder if again, maybe through the lens of people, you might sort of refresh us at a relatively high level about what were some of those other experiences that you kind of had on the journey, presumably after graduating and kind of getting out there into the world of work. Quick one for those of you listening who work with producer groups and wine regions. If you're struggling to break through the noise and communicate your unique story, what you might not know is that Interpreting Wine offers best-in-class marketing services to unlock your unique character and tell your story more effectively. In today's competitive wine storytelling landscape, we've developed a transformative 3-phase approach. Tell better stories, increase event engagement, and activate untapped audiences. Transforming how you connect with your target market and driving measurable business results. We've reached full capacity for client projects with no new engagements until 20th of January 2025. Lock in our 2024 prices before they rise in January. Head to interpretingwine.com/2025 prices, where you can read the full blog and join the waitlist before we close. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
When I completed then the College of Hotel and Tourism Management, my goal at that time has always been to, in the end, become a general manager of a 5-star property hotel. That was sort of my plan, and therefore I wanted to explore, of course, the globe and seeing what the different hotels around the world in this category can offer me in terms of training first and so forth, and so I went down to Australia for about 9 months, studying again into this field of hotel management and food and hospitality in that sense, and that included again wine courses already at the time. So down studying in Australia, I then became a little bit more acquainted with the wines from down under, and seeing their different styles. Very expressive red wines with lots of good character and concentration. The Semillons from the Hunter Valley that intrigued me already at that time because of its age worthiness. I was amazed already by when you taste 10, 15-year-old dry white wines, how they can age gracefully. So that gave me a first picture of Australia right after the college that I attended in Austria, and then I wanted to explore the United States, and I also always wanted to work in the US at least for a period of time. So and I got an opportunity to work there for Hyatt hotels, my first job as an F&B trainee, basically. And well, guess what happened there? Looking back to the late 90s, so it was in 99, 2000, exploring, of course, a lot more about Californian wines. The wines from New York slowly also became recognizable Oregon, Washington, reading at this time, I must say, I think really influential papers such as The Wine Advocate, The Wine Spectator, and that this was also the time where Austrian wine was seen a little bit more frequently already in New York, in San Francisco, and I was of course very happy when I was there and see that wines from our tiny little country were already represented in some of the good restaurants. So that gave me a first glimpse of the American wine scene, and that was already then 4 years after graduating from high school, 4 or 5 years, and I was afraid of losing. And I had French in the college as well in Austria, but I was afraid of losing my French. So I said I need to go to France in order to have hopefully a bit of a remembrance of my language skills in French, and so I went to France for a year, and there obviously it was basically all about the wines from their country. And I was very lucky to have had opportunity to work with some really good maîtres d' and sommeliers there, who educated me not only about Bordeaux and about Rhône and about Burgundy, but we went to the lesser known regions of Corsica, of southern France, to some extent some lesser known appellations maybe in the Loire Valley, and having spent then a full year basically in France, gave me a good overview of, I must say, what I still consider my favorite wine country in the world, because I apart from Austria, obviously, but I must say that I've had my greatest wine moments with wines from France, and as I told you before, my first great experience with the wines from Austria, from Kranachberg, So then I was able to have a very important country in the wine world, where I knew already then a little bit, but then I already had 2 bigger new world destinations. And so you gradually get interested in more things. Yeah,
and it's as you just said, that it's such an interesting mix / contrast of cultures and wine styles, and I'm curious, again, as we're talking about people, are you able to potentially reflect on any specific mentors and people who you maybe found were especially significant in shaping your approach across that very wide-reaching journey?
Well, I think generally I guess it has to start probably with your mother and your father, if you have a somewhat stable and good relationship with them, and I think that shaped and formed me in a sense where I think I got good tasting buds and skills through the cuisine from my mom, because she at this time and certifying oneself as being organic was certainly not a norm in the 80s and early 90s, where I was in the teens, and but all she had was basically organically grown produce from her garden and so forth. And so I would get not a lot of artificial stuff. And I think the perseverance and endurance that my dad had was also something that gave me then enough substance, I guess, to go further in the education field of wine. Well, and then, as I said, also, my brother far away, and I'm so glad and thankful to now call Francis Robinson an acquaintance, or a person that I talk to from now and then. And so Francis Robinson and her approach in explaining the wine was certainly also very very key to me. So you have, and after this, you of course meet people during your time as being a sommelier, as being a restaurant manager, as being a manager of then a company running wineries. They will further mentor you and influence you. And so I would not count it as only being a couple, but the ones that I mentioned gave me probably the food, and were the true source of the important things that led then hopefully to where I am today.
Yeah, no, I like it, and they are early influences as well, which I think is great. It's not always that people refer back to the sort of the family and the family environment at home, and I think this would also then be a great time to potentially bring us up to date. Because you're, as we've said, you're back now in Austria, so maybe bring us up to speed with how did that chapter of the story unfold?
Right. So after France, I again wanted to go back after a very short marketing stint in Austria in the hospitality field, but my thirst for working truly with wine just was too big, and so I got the opportunity to go back to the United States and work there as a sommelier and restaurant manager in Colorado in the Rocky Mountains, and which was then a really great opportunity for educating me further in terms of buying wine and not only American wine but wines from all over the world. Which was very good, and that's where I also met my wife in Vail in Colorado, and we then, however, moved back to Austria in 2003, and the idea of founding a group of growers from different places in Austria that help each other in marketing and selling wine across the globe was already there. So at this time, I was in contact with Sattlerhof. So that brings me back to my first aha moment. And he talked to other growers in Austria, trying to form sort of an Austrian package from one hand, and that we would sell across the globe. So this was sort of a new idea, because that the Austrian wine industry is rather small, structured. It's very fragmented, and this was at a time, however, where Austria has seen another swing up in terms of international recognition. But there is no such setup as in another country like the US, where even a small producer has a marketing department or a sales department. And we are talking about small to medium-sized wineries globally. So they got me, and we were able to form this group. And it was 5 producers, one specializing in Sauvignon Blanc, Morillon, one in Grüner Veltliner and Riesling, the other one red wines from Austria, the other one a Viennese specialist from Vienna with field blends. And so this one I was able to sell across the globe over almost 12 years, which was a wonderful experience. And this is when I also started my studies with the Master of Wine program.
And that group is still going?
That still exists. Okay. It's still existing. We gave ourselves at the beginning 2 years. We said we try it for 2 years, and if it works, fine, we continue. If not, then we gave it a go. And now it seems that they are in the 21st year. So that's definitely a good success.
And sorry, what is the name of that group? Because I'm sure I may have come across.
Premium Estates of Austria.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And however, of course, this is largely linked to traveling extensively, because that was a lot about working together with the partners around the globe, by slowly but surely also going a little bit more into the production side of things, because for specific countries, we wanted potentially to make a specific blend, a specific cuvée from different plots of either Grüner Veltliner or Sauvignon Blanc or whatever. So that gave me also the opportunity to touch a little bit more base also with the production side of things. And all this was a wonderful experience and just very important also for the studies, because not only was I able to see a lot of different markets around the world and how wine was being sold in Canada and China and Japan and the Scandinavian countries and the UK, but it also gave me the opportunity to then look a bit more into the production. The one downside, as I said, was definitely the traveling part. I mean, it's great on one hand, but from a personal point of view, raising a family, and which happened at that time, was certainly more of a challenge. And sort of out of the blue came a call from Willy Bründlmayer, who is definitely considered one of the pioneers of Austrian winemaking and viticulture in our country, and asked me in late 2014 if I could imagine myself as running alongside of him at the winery, since he's slowly gearing into retirement. And he gave me, thankfully, a lot of time, because of course also there's a lot of responsibility involved in this, and it entailed also moving the entire family a couple hundred of kilometers. So it was then in 2016 when we came here into the Kamptal appellation. Langenlois is where I'm sitting right now. And ever since then, truly, we have been gradually trying to even raise further the quality of the wines, and working strong together with a wonderful team of people. My quest for a fine quality Kamptal wine is not over yet.
I'm sure, and I think that I know you've mentioned Willy there, but I think would you be able to again potentially kind of position him a little bit for the listeners, just in terms of what did that mean really when you got the call, and how did that feel, and then how has that kind of, I guess, played out in the years since?
Yeah. So to the winery and himself, maybe it's important, worth mentioning that he took over this already well-run winery from his father in 1981. And his father received a already really very wide recognition nationally and internationally by making great wines from the Kamptal very early on. His father changed the mixed agricultural farm into a 100% winery right after the war in 1947. So rather early on, he was focusing entirely on viticulture. And in 1981, Willy Jr. took over, and really was pushing the quality further up. Then, maybe some listeners might remember 1985, 1986 in Austria, which were not the greatest years for the export industry of Austrian wine, since there were few producers, not here in this area particularly, but more in the eastern part of the country, who were using forbidden elements, glycol, to enrich the wines. Thankfully, nobody was harmed, or there was no incident in terms of death or something of that sort. But it meant that our wine industry broke down significantly, and it was few producers, and Willy Bründlmayer is certainly one of them, who then, in this rather dire times of Austrian wine, raised up the bar again, tried to work entirely on quality and nothing else. Yeah. There were some great producers in the Wachau, very few in Burgenland, and some in the Steiermark region that then really grew together and pushed for quality and nothing else. And after the scandal, Austria received the strictest wine law in the world at that time. And so we always say here that this scandal actually was intended almost to happen for then the move and the way forward for Austrian wine, which after after this scandal, it really went up. Basically, the recognition went up by raising the quality, by working with a very hands-on approach, family-owned small wineries trying to push themselves up, and Willy Bründlmayer was certainly one of them who just continued to do so. And And now, not only do we have great dry white wines from the Kamptal, mainly made out of Grüner Veltliner and Riesling, but his international recognition actually was achieved by winning a blind tasting Chardonnay competition at a side event in Vinitaly, exactly in 1986, with the 1985 Chardonnay, where great Grand Cru and Premier Cru Burgundies were aimed to be blind tasted compared to Italian top Chardonnays like Gaia, like Jerman, and so forth. And there was the Chardonnay 85 in there too, and that won the tasting. And so from this moment onwards, the international window was opened also for the winery, and and I'm just very blessed and happy to be here where I am now, because not only is he a grower and a farmer, Willy Bründlmayer also has a great education on the business administration side of things, which is very crucial and very important in our industry. And so it's a great combination of having a view of an entrepreneur, but by never forgetting sort of the roots and not forgetting the actual aim of us is trying to present our clients a wine with sense of place that is deeply rooted in the Kamptal, and really can do that. And I'm just really very, very happy where I am at this moment.
Yeah, amazing. And I think this is really, I think, working well for me, because you're, again, I think you've really nicely covered there, the people elements, the cultural elements, and I think that gives me, and I believe it gives the listener just a much deeper appreciation of some of the hard times as well, but also that of course with perspective and with focus, and you've obviously you're in the right place. Let's say that. One thing, as we I think really move into talking about your expertise, I think again one of the things that you almost mentioned in passing there was, I got my Master of Wine on the way, and I think any listener who's heard any of my previous interviews with Masters of Wine, or indeed I interviewed Julian Gorbooth from the Institute quite recently, really understands the breadth, the depth. Some might say the sheer intricacy and just incredible depth of knowledge that's required. And I'd love to know, really, and I think it will link us through to what you do today, really, Andreas, is really how easy is it to embody all that you've learned on the Master of Wine in your work? How do you even start to bring such a broad syllabus into what you do?
I believe one thing that the study program of the Institute of Masters of Wine, coming from a production point of view, or from a producer point of view, does to you is raising the objectivity level to your wines. And you look at how your wines perform and are perceived more neutrally and objectively when you go through this entire Master of Wine program. And I think that's also crucial for then eventually continuing to raise, trying at least to raise the quality of your own wines. As you know, quality is always subjective and is always interpreted by many people in a different way, which is totally normal and makes total sense. But that's something that I found was very instrumental when I was going through this program. And this, when maybe just going back quickly, why I did that. So when I read the book from Chances, Wine Course, then I looked at her education profile in the world of wine, and then this was the first time in the late 90s trying to find out what that was, what that entailed, and that sounded already very interesting and intriguing to me, this program, and in the back of my head I always then thought, all right, if there's ever the chance of going to that program, I'd love to do it. So a couple of years later, and this was in 2001, I started just with the very basic WSET level 1, and went through all the stages until I believe it was 2005 when I had the diploma in my hands. And that already helped me also from a global point of view, because it doesn't matter if you are in Japan or in New Zealand or in Canada or in Spain. The people in our field understood that from a WSET point of view or from a wine education point of view, you're at that level. So that was important for me because I was traveling so much. And then I started the MW program in 2008. And finished then in 2012. And the great thing at the moment, I think, with what you get out of the program is actually living basically the MW study program in reality, in a way, and that I am able to do here at this winery. Why is that the sense, or why is that the case? Although we are, for Austrian term, we are rather bigger winery, for global terms, medium minus sized, I'd say. However, we are producing a quite wide array of styles of wines, which is great. So we have traditional method sparkling wine. We have dry white wines, which is makes up the large chunk of our production. We have dry red wines. And in best cases, if there is a good year with noble rot, we will also make sweet wines. So stylistically, we cover already quite a big range. And you need to do that in the MW program as well. And through the role that I'm in at the moment as running basically the winery, so you also need to know certainly a little bit about viticulture. You need to know a little bit of what's happening in the cellar and how vinification is processed and how things have to be done or not. Then you, of course, need to know about the entire business of wine. So looking at the winery itself, and then also how to market the wines accordingly. And obviously, we need to also face contemporary issues. And they, at the moment, could range from ESCA increase in the vineyards to Generation Z and millennials potentially consuming less wine, what to do, to the global climate crisis, how should we adapt with that? It's basically what you have to do in theory in your MW program, and that is something which is very exciting. A day is never boring. Entails also, of course, the human resources side of things, which is key and elementary, and so this is basically living the MW program now in real life, pretty much. And really well put. And I just questioning my own question. I guess I wonder sometimes if around the qualification, the law is about how difficult it is to pass the exam, how much knowledge you have to have, this kind of focus on this encyclopedic knowledge. I think rather than some of the things you brought out there, Andreas, where again, my read on what you've said there is around, I think, primarily analysis. And I think analysis is a common skill that again can be applied to whatever comes up kind of across your desk, issues internally, externally, they will all need a certain amount of analysis. And then I think also just, synthesis and kind of pattern recognition, because you obviously don't want to face every challenge from square one. And it may be that you've seen those challenges in Australia, in the US, in France, and they might have had a different name and a different look, but being able to sort of synthesize, recognize, and then analyze at the appropriate time. It feels as though that's actually also a kind of a core tenet of the MW program, because again, no one person can know everything, and I'd argue with technology, why should it's not a memory test, is it? It's actually it must have some real world applicability. That's for certain. I think it just depends on what your profession then is in the long run. And obviously, a journalist will have a different need from the program than a producer or somebody dedicated directly to sales. So one person will take out different elements and things from the study program. What everyone, I think, can profit from is just the great network that you basically start to have as being already in the study program, basically, because you meet a lot of great people from around the globe, from all different sorts of fields, and if you nurture the network accordingly, then you will also profit from it in the long run. So of course, time is the new currency, and everyone only has a limited space to be interactive with each other. But friendships sometimes remain for such a very long period of time, and if you have a question about a certain production process, you might ask another MW colleague in New Zealand or in South Africa, and so that's also one benefit from the program, even if you haven't entirely passed it, which, as you know, can happen.
yeah, and no, it's so interesting that and maybe it's just more as I'm more aware that topic, that exact topic, keeps coming up, and I think it's it's almost like this kind of hidden demographic that doesn't really show up on online, or there's nothing on LinkedIn necessarily to say that you've passed stage 1, for example, and didn't complete the qualification. But it's just interesting that, again, I think the analogy myself and Julian were using is just that getting to the peak is like climbing Mount Everest, but you've already maybe gotten halfway up the mountain, or you've even started climbing or thought about climbing the mountain, which is most people don't even ever get anywhere near that. So I think it is quite remarkable.
Yeah.
And as we shift really gears a little bit, and I'm keen to always bring out some of the challenges of guests, which I think again does make the journey more relatable, and maybe it was also interesting for you to reflect on some of those challenges. And when I asked you about that, you spoke about, I think, two primary things. One was maybe that starting in your current role, there were challenges, and actually that transition perhaps was a challenge in and of itself. And then you did also mention something, Andreas, about a stubbornness around signature style, which I think, I just really leave it as an opportunity, to share, I guess, reflections on those challenges, which are now hopefully sort of really good learning opportunities, really good learning reflections for you and hopefully the listener.
Yeah, I think as we grow older, I think also there is a potential of palate habitus or preferences that will also alter and change over time. And so, but generally speaking, I think my approach in a wine quality and my preferred style is one that it has a lot to do, for me at least, with I would look for finesse, delicacy, elegance, purity, refreshing characters, saline elements, more so than full-bodied versions and a lot of concentration and so forth. So and when you come to such a role, then you obviously you not by purpose, but maybe instinctively your sort of little aim and goal is also to put your own little signature here and there in different wines, which of course has happened as I hear, but what I think was a little bit too strong and active from my side is to try and do it entirely over the entire program. And as you know, I mean, there are some wines that are geared for an early consumption that should attract a wider audience, that are easier to appreciate. And when you do this kind of wine too delicate, too refreshing, which potentially could have happened in my first year, then you learn from these things. So I think in every vintage, in every year, you learn. But especially in the ones where I think you try hard to implement something new, which should not be the real scenario and case that desired. Because, you know, I mean, people are accustomed to a certain style when they buy a certain label, and when that changes quite rapidly and quite distinctly, then there is a chance of losing this client, and that's obviously not what you'd like to have. At the same time, however, in some other wines, with the slight alteration of certain things, we have potentially increased the audience and became more familiar with top younger sommeliers and really people with a fine tongue, where we probably have not been as a whole beforehand. So in all, it sort of, I think, balances out in a way. But of course, you learn from things where you see easy drinking wine should not be complicated, and you should not do the same thing across all of the styles, I think. And so this was certainly one of the challenges and obstacles, or things that I have probably would do now in a different way if I were back in the same situation. And because, you know, in the whole, as a whole, we are in a wine bubble, I always say. So, you know, what we talk about is a real big wine family around the globe that covers a good amount of people. But if we spread the word wider, it would be even better, especially at a time now where, as I mentioned before, where we don't know where the next generation is going in terms of consumer behavior. So we should not make all of our produce complicated or too complex and too we all think, you know, this is this wine world and it's so important. No, in a whole, of course it is important, because it's a heritage, it's a culture, it's a cultural beverage, and we should transform that. But we also need to have, in these times where people have less time or less time for attention, to make wine also a little bit more accessible or comprehensible. And that is something that we also need to nurture in order to maintain and retain this this high level of culture that we are actually in this world of fine wine.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating, and it absolutely preempts, I would say, something that I was wanting to ask you, really, because again, I think based on, you know, your experience with Premium Estates of Austria, with Master of Wine, with your current role, you know, I think actually that for me there's a very clear relationship between those types of challenges that you mentioned and getting very meta, actually the work that Interpreting Wine is doing and the types of messages that I'm sending out there. So, you know, just kind of in summary, you know, very, very high level without getting into the details, you know, I've been really talking a lot about three key things, which is the wine industry telling better stories, you know, really going deep into the stories. Secondly, really thinking about event engagement, you know, and where a lot of the money kind of goes in, but also activating untapped audiences. You know, again, I think it's that thing of, it's maybe not even necessarily just about age. You know, why stop there? You know, there may be people in their 30s and 40s who haven't had the, you know, the opportunity to try wine, and I'm, you know, always very mindful of the direction that wine has been going in, and, you know, things like ProVine and international fairs and tastings and in the tasting room. I'm not maybe as I'm not saying let's get rid of all of that. I've always tried to design interventions that can complement that and can live alongside that, can actually increase the impact and improve them in a lot of ways. And is the wine world ready to make those sorts of changes, or are we changing quickly enough?
I think the wine world sort of needs to be ready in a way for this, in order to just as what you mentioned, just to probably engage with a wider audience and to reach out to people that we have not reached yet. So that's that would be very, very key and important. It would be very elementary to make wine to some extent more accessible, because should we have those people then in our wine bubble, the goal and the hope is that they would actually then increase the interest and say, okay, what else is out there? And then let's talk about the Volnays and Richebourgs of this world, or from Spring Mountain fruit from the Napa Valley and so forth. Then we can go more into detail, because then you talk about real a cultural beverage, a beverage hopefully that speaks about sense of place, where history is associated with it, where different cultural aspects are associated with it. It's not about an alcoholic beverage, I think. And that will probably be key in the next few years, to not lose interest by having just a too complicated approach of our wine industry.
Yeah, it's again, I'm not sure that I've actually ever shared this, but what I still remember in the early days, really, one of the things that really appealed to me, I still say this with a big smile on my face, but wine has never been for me the drink or the choice for when you're trying to get drunk, if that makes sense. It's almost just culturally, or flavor, or just the size of the glass, or I think there are lots of different things. I call them almost like speed bumps. It's like, if you want to really just get completely drunk, go to something stronger, go to vodka, or that's not what wine is sort of all about. And I think actually that's not really being picked up on by wine, because wine in itself, I think, is actually a great wine. It's a great alcoholic beverage that's actually got some natural temperance kind of almost built in culturally, and taste and price as well. All of these things, I don't think they necessarily encourage us to excess consumption of wine. No,
you're absolutely right. And we haven't even touched the food matching part, where in many historic wine countries and regions, wine has always been enjoyed as a food companion, and not by being, as you say, not a beverage to be to get intoxicated, or to have an effect on your body per se, that that you lose control over some things. No, it was more about being a cultural drink to be complemented with the regional food at this time.
Amazing. And I think as we transition into what I call the service element, I think this would actually be the right time to delve into a little bit more the winery, because I think actually again, you reflected on the sort of the challenges starting out and getting into the style, which, presumably over time, flexibility and awareness of markets, etc., all always in mind. But presumably, though, there is a if you like, a sort of a shorthand that you can use to communicate around the winery and its place in Austria. So I'd be curious to kind of pick that up and again. Hear that from you as to what that looks like today, really.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to rely sometimes also, hopefully, on more neutral and objective palettes and tongues, and then also people that are in the journalism side of things. And I think when I can mention two who have, I think, quite a big experience in wine, both domestically but also internationally. So Peter Moser, he has been the chief editor of Falstaff magazine, which is sort of the most influential and most important wine magazine here in Austria over let's say decades now. He says about our winery that, you know, it doesn't matter if it's the easy drinking, light-bodied Grüner Veltliner or the complex single vineyard Cru Riesling or a Sekt Austria, a sparkling wine traditional method, or a red. It looks like that in every category we can be on a very, very high level of quality, and that's something that I think but it's not sort of a clear mission of our team to do that. But if we make something, we'd really like to put up our quality ladder very high. It doesn't matter if it's now easy drinking, light, white, or a structured red or sparkling wine. And another person, so from an international point, Terry Tees, who has been with looking or tasting our wines also over decades now, and he consulted for our US importer Skernick. He a couple years ago he told me, I think, Andreas, I think you guys are basically 3 wineries in one. Like you have your team. It seems like you have your team set up. There's one entirely focused on sparkling wine traditional method because of the quality, and then you have dry white, dry red team, which is the key, and then also of course some specialties like the sweets or a muscatella, yellow muscat, sometimes that we make, or a Cabernet Franc, which Willy Bründlmayer, going back again to pioneering ideas, planted already in 1985, 1986 here. Just, thinking, maybe at some point we can get also Cabernet Franc ripe here in the Kamtal, a rather cool climate destination, certainly at that time, and now still, planted widely with white wine varietals, and if it's red, it's early ripening red by far and large. So I think this is something that we hear from an outside point of view of ourselves, and I think there are a lot of people here in our winery who engage in trying just to establish a very high level of quality into the bottle, and I think Willy also gives us this opportunity. Willy is there also for expertise, of course, and his father laid the groundwork because he brought some of the best vineyards of the Kamtal early into the winery at a time where terraced vineyards were abolished or not looked after because it was too hard to tend the vineyards up there when mechanization started, So overall, I think this is something that we can be proud of and that we are trying to continue to work on hard. But we also have our challenges and our obstacles and have to question ourselves. So are we doing this right? But overall, I think the market gives us at least the response that we're on a fairly good roll.
Yeah, which is Well, I think actually there it's a perfect transition to the the last full section of the interview. Where I asked you to reflect on your purpose, and the lasting impact that you want to make, and your response to that was a dedication to 100% quality, intriguingly searching for the ultimate origin, and displaying uniqueness and authenticity. And I know that's probably a multi-hour conversation there, but I would just ask you to unpack some of that again in the context of your purpose and I guess legacy, if you like.
Yeah, sure. Again, I think it's vital, and everyone knows that. I mentioned this beforehand, that quality is always subjective. You can't quantify quality in a way, can you? But we have a certain idea of how we perceive quality, and again, it comes back to these key words and elements like balance, like finesse, like persistence, good intensity, delicacy. Our wines shouldn't be loud. They shouldn't be blousy. That's not our goal. And I think in that sense, they also might require sometimes a little bit more time than others because they might be shyer in their youth. But we would like to make wines that are age-worthy, because I think age-worthiness and aging capacity is an element of quality. So that's one thing. And of course, for me, some of the most interesting wines and wines with the highest esteem of quality, according to my feel, are wines that are not interchangeable. So wines with one specific, authentic origin feeling. You could call it some of the greatest champagnes. You can call it some of the greatest Chablis, where you say, okay, this can only come from that specific place. And I think we have already some wines here where you can feel that, especially from vineyards like Heiligenstein, like Lamm, like Käferberg. You can make sense of place wines from these sites. And I think that is sort of the lasting impact that should be attained, let's say, in 30 years from now on. And when we look back to a 2019 or 2020 vintage, the next generation will say, wow, that's something that it still, has these key elements that I just mentioned in the wine. And I think if that happens, then I think we have achieved the most of the goals that we set ourselves, or I set myself.
Yeah, no, I love it. Broadening that perspective out there into the future. So really, as we close off the interview now, Andreas, I'd ask you to just bring that perspective right in, really, and really just to share, I guess, two things: kind of what's on the horizon, kind of what's next for you and the winery, maybe in a sort of a more marketing role, or how are you kind of turning up out there in the world? What are the event plans, perhaps? But then also online, and as you said, time is the new currency. How can listeners stay up to date with your future projects and releases?
Yeah, I mean, what's on the horizon? I think what we do have to look at a little bit sharper is really the development of the climate, because when I just look back to this year, 2024, how best to adapt to extremes, to weather extremes, and that's something that we need to be aware of. This is one thing from a production point of view. The other thing is a fair and equal pay for the ones who tend the vineyards, who tend the vines, who are grape producers, who look after our wine culture by making sure that the vineyards are in shape. This is also on the horizon for me, because I think we would lose our wine landscape if the pay is not adequate and the conditions and circumstances, because people just give up on it and they go to a different industry, a different job, and that's a little bit of a sad development that we see here, but also I've heard it from different regions around the world. But then again, we want to make sure that we can tell the people in the future more about the specificity or about the uniqueness of the wines from the Kamptal, or let's say from the Danube region in a broad sense. So what makes the Kamptal so special that the people recognize our wines quicker? This would be something on the horizon, and that entails both working, of course, on continuing the sense of place quality game, but at the same time trying to communicate that accordingly into the times we are in. How do we communicate this effectively in the new media? By reaching a broader audience, by giving them enough information in a nutshell. So we need to watch, obviously, also the development of AI, of new potential social media channels that are developing, because we cannot close ourselves by not just, that's new. We don't need that. No, that is not for neither our winery nor for the entire area here, because we still talk about rather small structured industry. We are not as well known as Burgundy is, for example, and so that's enough on the horizon for us to keep busy in the next couple of years.
A huge thanks to today's guest, Andreas Wickhoff MW, General Manager for Weingut Bründlmayer. Do visit bründlmayer.at, the link is below, where you can learn more and find their main social media handles. And why not reach out to Andreas to let him know what you thought of the episode and ask any questions raised. Next time on Interpreting Wine, Mosaic of Wine Series 1 in episode 573, I'll be speaking with Milena Berman, co-founder of Haute Côte. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to be alerted when that episode goes live. See you then.